Is everybody there? Say something in the chat. Can you guys? Yes. Hello, Christina. Hello, Ruth, Jenny, Michelle, Beth. I love Crowdcast. This is not, they do not pay me, but I love seeing the chat. It's just the best part. Hello and welcome to our dating story swap. This is the first time we're doing this as part of our TueNighter Tea series, which is our ongoing series where we talk with wonderful, interesting, fascinating women. And tonight is going to be no different in that we're talking with Jodi Klein about her new book, all about first dates. And we'll get into that in a minute. But I just want to say hi, I'm Margit, for those of you that don't know. I think I know just about everybody in the chat so far. And I am the founder of TueNighters and TueNight. We are a storytelling platform for grown-ass women, Gen X women, women on the verge, women in midlife, all those things. We are here, community, and we are a happy, wonderful community. And we have a website with those stories. We have the TueNighters, which is our community that you can join and subscribe to. And we host wonderful events like this. This one is free. Some of them are a little bit premium because we put our heart and soul into them. And we'll talk about some of the ones coming up at the end. And we have a newsletter that you should subscribe to, and we'll put some of those links in the chat at the end. But we do lots of stuff all in the effort to bridge those connections between those of us in Gen X. You know, we don't always sort of get the chance to talk about our stories and share our stories, which is how we really connect with each other. So tonight, I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping first. If you would like, just feel free to use the chat, message each other, message us. We're gonna ask you to share your worst dates and your best dates in the chat if you are so inclined. We are also, after we speak with Jodi, we're also gonna bring some people up to tell their stories. We've spoken to those people in advance, so it's a bit of an open mic. I have not heard these stories in advance, so I don't know what we're gonna hear. I'm excited. And let's see, this recording will be also live after the fact. So if you miss anything or you want to rewatch it because it's so amazing, you can do that. And I just want to also tell, before I bring Jodi up, I want to tell you a little story about the picture in the advertisement for this event tonight, which is, I don't know if you saw it, it's me in 1984 at my junior prom, with a guy who has a bag over his head. That's to protect his identity, of course. But this was probably my first bad date ever, you know, junior in high school. And I was set up with a guy that I barely knew. I don't know. I don't even remember how I was set up, if it was my friends or what. All I remember is like when I was set up with him for the prom, my dad was like, oh, I know his dad. He's like a judge in Philadelphia or something. Like he's this famous judge. And I was like, okay. And my dad was super interested in that fact. And I was like, all right. Anyway, didn't know him. My dad thought he was okay because he knew this judge dad. And so he shows up to my front door. He's an okay looking guy, really tall, but he shows up to my front door stoned out of his mind. And he's clearly stoned. He's like giggling. He's like red-eyed. And my grandmother, who is in her 80s, who lived with us, answers the door. She's all of like 4'10", answers the door, this big guy. And she's like, well, hello, come on in. And he's like, how's it going, Granny? I'm just like, oh my God. Anyway, we went to the prom. He proceeded to dance with a wooden chair, the entire night. And I hung out with my friends. I don't think I danced with this guy once. We posed for that photo, but that was about it. Anyway, terrible date. The coda to the story is I was sharing this in advance of this event tonight with my dad. And my dad was like, oh, I remember that guy. His dad was a judge in Philadelphia. My dad, who's like 88, still remembers my junior prom date, which is really sad. Anyway, that is my story. Without further ado, let us introduce the first lady of first dates, Jodi Klein. She is the author of First Date Stories, Women's Romantic and Ridiculous Midlife Adventures, so perfect for us, which was just published by She Writes Press last week. She is the host of the podcast First Date Stories and has a blog of the same name. She has dated longer than many. I don't know, that could be contested, I imagine, but she says she's had 400 dates over 26 years, and she met her husband when she was 47. I met mine when I was 40, so I love that. She's a graduate of UC Davis and holds an MBA from the Ross School of Business and University of Michigan. Please join me in welcoming Jodi.
Hi, everybody. It is such a thrill to be here, Margit. I'm a proud TueNighter, and I'm a proud woman who has been on, like you said, a lot of first dates.
That's awesome. Well, we're so happy to have you. And as this is a TueNighter tea, I hope you have your tea.
I do. In fact, we were talking about grandparents. I took out the teacup my grandmother gave me.
I love that.
I only take it out for special occasions. So I took it out for today, and I am drinking bourbon vanilla rooibos tea.
Ooh.
Bourbon vanilla rooibos tea. Yes.
Where did you get that?
Yummy. It is Mariage Frere is the company that makes it. So I recommend it to everyone.
Okay.
It's delicious.
Oh, cool. Is it actually bourbon in it? It's spiked? Like
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I taste more than the vanilla than the bourbon, but still, it's yummy.
Excellent.
Very yes.
Well, you are going to read us a chapter from your wonderful book, which is a story. You have collections of stories from other people, which I think is wonderful. Your community of different stories. So without further ado, I'll let you share your story.
Okay, fabulous. So I am going to share a story, everyone, that was contributed to this collection by a woman who went out on a date that we have titled The 8-Minute Date. So that kind of gives you a sense of things. All right. And her name, her name is Stephanie, and the guy she went out with is Frank. And just to set up the scene, Stephanie is chronically late. And so she was chronically late to this date, and Frank is not pleased. And when she got there, he asked her if she wanted some coffee, and she said yes. And then he said, well, go get yourself some. And he sat down. So that's where we're picking up. All right. So she's thinking to herself, did he balk at buying me coffee to punish me for being late? He'd been the one to ask her out, so she had assumed he'd pay. It was a gesture that Stephanie appreciated and didn't take lightly. She understood the value of $1 and spent hers wisely. Her 20 years working as a nanny had generated a lot of personal satisfaction, but not a lot of income. It had been over 2 years since Stephanie got a raise. Moreover, she came from a generous family, and her parents had taught her that a person's generosity, whether measured in time, talent, or dollars, revealed a lot about what kind of person they were. Stephanie stopped a few minutes in front of the counter. Should I even bother? I could save the $4 and just leave. Or I could get the coffee and see where things lead. She stepped forward and ordered a mocha. When she returned to the table, Frank took the iPhone that had been consuming his attention and placed it in his back pocket. Stephanie sat down. He leaned forward in his chair and smiled. His teeth were white and straight, the result of braces, she figured. Let's try this again. So, what did you do this weekend? He asked. I sailed to Tiburon with some friends, she replied. Ah, Tiburon, Frank said slowly, drawing out the words in a way that made Stephanie think that he was reminiscing about a special time spent in the waterfront town. Did you go to Sam's Anchor Cafe? Why, yes, I did, she answered, scooting her chair forward. Actually, I love that restaurant. One of her favorite getaways. She'd spent 3 hours the day before, seated on the restaurant's vast deck, enjoying some cocktails while gazing out at the bay. Sam's is pretentious. It's just awful, Frank said. Stephanie saw no levity in his brown eyes. He was serious in his indictment. An awkward silence ensued. Frank stared into his empty coffee cup. Stephanie picked up hers and sipped it slowly. How much more of this guy's attitude am I going to take? After what seemed like a minute, but was probably less, Frank looked up and blurted out, I'm really into antiques. Are you? No, I'm really not, she replied. You're not? Why, antiques are the embodiment of the history of a family, a society, a people, Frank said. Even though the places are old and most of them are stately and mysterious in truly unique ways. I spent a lot of my childhood going to antique flea markets with my mom. It was an adventure each time we went. As Frank rambled on about why he was enjoying his antiquing, Stephanie's mind wandered. I probably should have saved the $4. Stephanie took another long sip of her drink. It was almost gone. When Frank stopped speaking, she looked up, leaned back in her chair, crossed her legs, and smiled. What happened to the connection we had on email? Maybe some flirting will salvage this date? Frank flashed her a momentary grin, but then shifted his gaze down towards her tan Uggs. He looked at them intensely. Nice shoes, he said in a tone of voice that could only be interpreted as sarcastic. Stephanie threw her hands in the air. What? You don't like my shoes? Don't you have heels? He replied. Stephanie could feel her face heating up. She sprung out of her chair. Listen, buddy, in the 8 minutes I've been here, you have reamed me for being late, made me buy my own coffee, trashed Sam's after I told you I liked the place, dominated the conversation, talking about antiques after I said that I'm not interested in them. And then you insult my choice of shoes? Exactly who do you think you are? And you don't even look like your photos. Stephanie yanked her jacket and purse from the seat back, grabbed her scarf and hat, and stormed out of the cafe without looking back. So
Love it. Love it. Oh my God. Oh my God.
it is quite a
Good for
story.
her.
And it's one probably
Yes.
dimensions of that a lot of women who are with us tonight can relate to. Yes.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Definitely
Yes.
had those dates. So tell me a little bit. So this is like, yeah, this is the book, first date stories. Wonderful. And tell me how you came up with the idea for this book and sharing all
Yeah.
the different
Well, certainly.
voices
So,
and
first and
stories.
foremost, I wrote the book because I wanted it to be entertaining. Because we women in midlife need stories about ourselves that make us laugh. And there's not enough laughter in the world these days, anyway, right now. So, first and foremost. But secondly, I wrote this book because I want never couple divorced and widowed women to feel like they're part of a midlife posse that and to be encouraged to keep moving forward in the dating scene because as I know from having been single for 26 years after college and going through my 20s, 30s and getting into my 40s, things change a lot in the dating world when you're in your 40s. And one of the things and there's good things about it and there's not as good. But one thing about it is you don't hear as many stories because you don't have often as many friends who are at the same place in life as you are at that time. And so I wanted to elevate their voices and I wanted to elevate their advice and ideas.
It's great. And I love also that you, in addition to the stories, you kind of have the rest of the story. So you
Mhm.
tell the first date story, but then you have like, and then here's what happened. And she ran away or like they got married or whatever. And that's great. And then you have the kind of advice at the end, which is really great too. Like, here's what she should have done, right?
Right,
Is
right.
that important to have that as well?
Exactly. Because we often, as we get into our 40s and 50s and 60s, don't have as many women to talk to about our stories. We don't get the advice from them. And that's what we
Right.
do as women. We validate our lives. We get guidance from each other through the sharing of our stories. And so the book was a great place to provide that. So get everybody who wrote or contributed a story that I wrote up in this book, including the ones that I put in of my own, want to help other people, want to help other women. And so having that bit of advice is also part of helping women just move on with their journey down the
Yeah.
dating path.
Yeah. And you said you went on 400 dates. I think there's
Or
probably a lot
so.
of us in, who can kind of relate, especially in this online dating, like quick, fast world that we're in. Um, which one of those, I imagine you obviously didn't put all of them in the book, but
Right.
can you share which was the absolute maybe best and which was maybe I'm going to assume your best was your husband, but maybe the worst. What was the absolute worst of those?
Wow, there were quite a few. So, um, I guess maybe the worst was the one where I went out with a guy and he didn't say a word, like hello, and he could say like
Yeah.
that was it. He just sat there silent and muttered a word there, here and there, and I could barely hear him. But I decided not to walk away in that moment, even though it was clear that it was just a bizarre situation and I didn't really understand what he was doing there. I turned it into a game for myself and I tried to get him to talk. I wanted to see if I could get
Oh,
him to
that's
talk.
cool.
So, and that's the thing I want to share with ladies here, because if you're out in the dating world and you find yourself in a situation that is not ideal, you don't have to exit. Like you can turn it into a learning experience. You can turn it into something fun for yourself. And
Right.
I didn't win that game, but it just kind of it was something I turned into. It was just so bizarre. It was just so bizarre. He kind of grunted his way through our whole time together. Yes.
Well, there's that, and then there's the story you have of the guy who did like
Yes.
an improv scene in his first, like, what was it seemed like the first 5 minutes of the date. I have dated that guy, I think, actually, who just suddenly is like, okay, let me try out my material on you, and you're just like, oh, okay.
Yes,
Um,
Rob. You have met Rob, exactly.
oh, okay, that's not, yeah,
And the
more
story, the vignette I opened the book with, which is the guy who took me on a date to the grocery store deli to eat food for free, and
story. Oh my
and
gosh.
I was so mortified. I was so mortified. What I didn't say in the book is that after that was done, I bought like a week's worth of salads from the grocery store because I just couldn't handle this guy like ate his way through everything that was in the counter and the cabinet there, and he was not going to pay a dime. So that was really a bad one too.
That was pretty good.
Yes.
Yeah. And I like the idea. You say kind of in the beginning and at the end, really the idea that you keep showing up.
Mhm.
And you start with sort of the sales thing, which is every no is closer to a yes, which there's sort of similar takes on the same idea. Can you talk about that concept a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. Because oh, dating is a numbers game, and your number could be really high, and you just gotta keep at it. And it's also dating is a skill. You need to develop a skill to date for the most part. And so if and also in life, life doesn't just come to us. We have to be present for life, and we have to be active in life. And so the concept is, believe it is if it's important to you to be coupled and find that person, believe that you will find that person, but don't just think that they're going to knock on your door one day, because they're likely not, even unless you want the DoorDash guy, and maybe that works out. I don't know, but meet him. But you got to be out there. You got to keep showing up for opportunities to meet people, and
Yeah.
you got to keep being present in life for everything you do. Keep showing up.
Yeah. How did you finally, how'd you meet your husband? Actually.
Well, that's a it's an example of showing up, because I almost didn't meet him. I'd signed up to go to an event that was a business networking and kind of political event happening in San Francisco here, right as the San Francisco Giants were on their way to the World Series. So I almost didn't go for that reason, but I decided to go because there was someone speaking I wanted to talk to. So my plan was just to go and leave, and that was it. When I got to this event, my friends hadn't shown up because they were watching the baseball game. So I decided I'm still going. I walked into the room and everybody who was there was coupled, 2 and 3 people. There was only one person who was standing alone. And having been someone who dated for 26 years, you get to the point often where you can walk up to people and start a conversation. And so I started to walk towards him, and he turned around and walked to the the buffet table. So I just followed him to the buffet table. And I was so eager to just get a conversation going because I needed someone to stand with until the speeches started. And so I asked him about the food and whether it was spicy, and we started a conversation, and he asked me to go stand with him at one of the tables. I'm like, yes, someone to talk to. And so I was sure he was coupled. I hadn't even looked at his finger. I'd already been on a date that day with somebody else for lunch. And as we're talking and eating, he suddenly out of the blue asked me what my relationship status was. And I literally choked on the food I was eating. It was just so out of the blue because it was one of those cases where I wasn't in that zone, and it came from left field. And yet that's so often how things work out for us, is when we least expect it, they happen. And I will tell you, ladies, that I've heard that said to me for those 26 years, when you least expect it. And I never believed it. I rolled my eyes inside my head, never to be rude. And yet one day it happened to me. So now I got to say, I believe it. It does work out that way.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. Yeah, I was actually so I met my husband online, online dating, and we've been married for 12 years. But we were actually just also in prepping for this event, just talking about when we had our first date. By the way, I hip checked a glass on our first date of wine, and it went flying across. It was the first thing I did. And he said something like, well, I guess it's going to be a good date. And I was like, immediately, I was like, yes.
That's
and,
great.
You know, it was like a great conversation. It was just one of those things that, like, it kind of, he actually was trying to get off of online dating. He was going to go travel. And I was kind of this, he had hot listed me, which was the parlance then. And because he was traveling, he unhot listed me, and I noticed it. And I was like, hey, what? And then I reached out to him and was like, hey, I saw you unhot listed me. And he was just like, oh shit. Well, yeah, well, why don't we go on a date?
Oh my gosh, that's how your date came to be. Is that
I said that backwards, but yes.
Way to go. Okay.
And then the funny part at the end was that he, so we had this fantastic date. I was like, it was one of those things where I was like, oh, this is what it is. Like after, I met him when I was like 39, 40, and I was like, this is how it is. And I've just met my person. And, but I had a date set up the next night, and I was like, oh, I'm supposed to go to see Amy Mann with this guy. I guess I'll cancel it. And he was like, no, don't cancel the date. You should go. It's Amy Mann. And I was like, really? He's like, yeah, why not? And the whole time at the concert, I was like leaned over this way, like as far away from the thigh, so I didn't give him any, because I was totally in the mark, my husband. And
as
that was over, I called my husband, and I was
that's
just like,
awesome.
okay, done.
Anyway. And Mark knew that. He sensed it. So that's why he was good with you going to Amy Mann with another guy, because he felt that. Yeah, that's terrific.
There was like, so it was a good sign. Anyway.
Awesome.
Well, I think we should, part of tonight is also hearing some live, as we said, sort of open mic dating stories. So I would love to open up the floor to some other folks, but Jodi, I hope you'll stick around. We'd love to bring you back at the end too,
absolutely.
And answer any other questions that people have. But I think we will bring up. Let me look at my list here.
Do it. I want to hear these stories. Like you said, first lady of first dates. I love hearing these stories. So let's hear them.
Look at that. Pretty good.
Yeah, it's great.
Okay. So thank you so much. And our first victim is Christina Blacken, I have in quotes here. This is all I know about this. Speaking of first dates. So Christina, won't you join us? Come on up.
Hello, hello.
Hello, beautiful. How are you?
I'm good. You give me hope with these dating stories. I'm like, this is amazing. I'm a single person, 33, but I love the serendipity of how you met your husband and hearing Jodi's stories as well. I'm like, oh, this is beautiful. You don't know where you'll find love.
It's true. It's so true. Well, tell us your story.
So my story starts out with a Lauryn Hill song. I don't know if y'all remember Can't Take My Eyes Off of You, but it goes, you're just too good to be true. Can't take my eyes off of you. You be like heaven to touch Well, my date was like the beginning part of that song. Too
Okay,
good to
that
be
was good.
true. Can't take my eyes off of you, because he was too good to be true. So I met this guy on Tinder. This was like 2018. I had just gotten out of a relationship that was 3 years long and had gone through a tumultuous point because he had cheated on me. And I was like, I don't have time for that. I appreciate this, but we have to move on. So I'm swiping on Tinder, trying a new approach to dating, which is reading the profiles, trying to find a connection in terms of creativity and passions and interests. And I come across this profile that says author. He's talking about all his creative projects and how he's passionate about words. And I was like, ooh, he reads and he writes? That's great. We're already starting off in a great direction. I should connect with this guy. So we connect. And red flag number one is he immediately wanted to meet. So we maybe had one exchange of messages. And he's like, yo, let's get off the app. Let's just meet up. Now, I know better than this because typically I like a few messages to make sure they're not a serial killer, to do some vetting. But I was trying to be different in my dating approach. So I was like, you know what, let's be spontaneous. So we decided to meet like 2 days later at a public place called Junior's, which is in Brooklyn, New York, a famous cheesecake place. And I got there early, so I sat down and ordered my little cheesecake because that's what you do at a cheesecake place. And when he entered the room, red flag number two popped up. And it was the way he was dressed. Now, I'm typically not super judgmental about how people dress. I love creativity of style. I don't care about labels or costs. But it looked really dated. He was wearing a band around his pants that had his cell phone in the clip on the hip. I was like, okay, that's very dad of him. He needs easy access to the cell phone. That's cool. All right. He had on a muscle tee, like a full sleeve muscle tee with like a vest on top. So it felt very 90s, but before it was trendy to rewear the 90s. I'm like, that's cool. I wonder why he's doing that. So he comes, he sits down, and he's super gregarious and kind of magnetic. And he's like, I'm so excited to meet you. It's so incredible. He's asking me all these questions about my life story. And then he tells me, I'm really, really excited because I just left a meeting with Random House, which if you are in publishing or you're familiar with them, they're a pretty popular publisher. And I'm like, that's awesome. What are you making? What's the meeting about? And he was like, well, I'm creating this incredible book about a part of my life. And they said that they want to publish it. So of course, the natural question is, what's the book about? And he looks at me kind of sheepishly and he goes, well, if I tell you what the book is about, you're either going to be really excited or you're going to want to run the other direction. So I immediately thought, oh, this mofo has killed somebody. He is a serial killer. But no, that is a serial killer response to be like, you're going to run if you want to know about my book. So I say, well, I'd love to know more. I'm open to hearing what it's about. And he says, well, when I was 13 years old, I was involved with a robbery of my neighbor. I essentially went into my neighbor's home and I robbed them at gunpoint. I was like, oh, okay, at gunpoint. So I'm taking all this info in. I'm trying to keep my face calm. And he's like, yeah, my friend was involved as well. We shot the owner. The person didn't die, but essentially we were charged with an armed robbery when he was 13. So I'm like, oh, okay, right. This is escalating. So he's like, well, I was taken to jail. And within the first month, I was put into solitary confinement for at least a month, which if you know anything about jail, it's terrible. It's a horrible way to treat people in jail. And I'm thinking, wow, he's a young person. He had told me some of his life story, so I knew he had a very traumatic childhood. So I'm trying to understand where he is at now. And he's like, well, you know, they moved you out of solitary confinement, and I had a sentence that was at least 30 years to life for this experience. And he started to do writing and poetry in jail. He was on his Tupac stuff. He was really trying to better himself in jail. And eventually a really benevolent family found out about his case and tried to help overturn the sentencing because it was a really harsh sentence for a young person. So they essentially help him to build a case to get out. Now, after he gets out, they're supporting him and they're like, you're a great writer. You should talk about your life story. So that's how he essentially got into publishing and speaking and writing. So I'm like, oh, this is incredible. This is a redemptive arc. He had this horrible start. He's getting out of jail. He's kind of starting a new life again. So in my mind, I'm thinking this was decades ago. I'm like, okay, you know, when did this happen? Like, have you been out for a while? And he tells me, oh, you know, I just got out 2 years ago. So I want you to do the math. He went in jail at 13 and he's about 45. So he had gotten out at 43. So immediately my mind's like, oh, he's missed the internet, social medias. So no wonder he's got a cell phone on his hip. He don't know how cell phones work. I'm like, this is crazy. He's missed so many life skills being in jail for this long. So I'm already doing the math and I'm like, okay, be open-minded. Everyone deserves redemption. I have a pattern of having projects for relationships. So I'm trying to be empathetic here, right? And I essentially asked him, okay, it's been 2 years. when is the last time you went and had, some therapy for this or processing the trauma of it? And he goes, I went to a camp, a day camp a year ago, and that was great. I'm fixed. I've got everything handled out, but I can't balance a checkbook. My life is a mess. He's telling me all these problems he has. So I am essentially marking down all the checklists of why we will not date. But in my mind, I think, you know what? Maybe we won't date seriously, but this could be fun, casual, sexual tryst. So let's just see where the night goes. So after we finish our little cheesecake, he invites me to his apartment, which obviously was conveniently near the cheesecake place, which is why he had suggested it, I'm sure. We walk to his apartment, which is this beautiful high-rise. It's all marble inside. There's a water fountain. There's security cameras. And I'm like, okay, I can't get murdered in here. There's too much cameras. Like, I should be fine. This is a really nice building. So we go up to his apartment, and as soon as we walk in, it's a beautiful little one-bedroom apartment, but it's really bare bachelor style, not a lot of furnishings. And he excuses himself to the bathroom. So I'm taking everything in. I see a counter, and on this counter is an industrial-sized tub of Vaseline. So I'm like, I like to moisturize. I like to be lubricated, but why an industrial-sized tub of Vaseline? And then I check next to it, and there's a huge industrial-sized box of condoms that are just strewn out next to the Vaseline like they're party favors or confetti. So I'm like, this man, I appreciate he practices safe sex, although Vaseline and condoms shouldn't go together because they break. But he probably doesn't know because he's been in jail since he was 13. Now he's 40, and I know he's talking about. I mean, all this is going through my mind, right? He's in the bathroom. He comes out. He has changed his clothing. He had put on some silky boxers and a little tank top. And so he was ready. You can tell he was like trying to transition into bed mode. And my mind's like, you are too old to be a sex educator. This is not going to work. So we sit down on the couch and we're having a conversation. And then he tries to kiss me. And it was one of the worst kisses I think I have ever had. It was like, I don't know how lips work kind of kiss. I don't know where tongue goes kind of kiss. So I immediately was like, you know what? I'm going to tell him I'm calling it a night. So I say to him, hey, it's been a really great time getting to know you. It's getting kind of late and I'm pretty tired, so I'm going to go home. And he had a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde moment. Up until that point, he was really kind and nice. But then he gets really mad. And he says, is this what women do? They play games and they lead you on and all this stuff. And I was like, no, it's just me calling it a night. I'm going to go home. So I call a cab. As I'm going home, I text him, I want to let you know about an idea called consent. Just because someone's come to your apartment doesn't mean they're obligated to do anything with you in terms of sexual encounters or experiences. I think you really need to know this and understand that was kind of uncomfortable how you reacted to me wanting to go home. And he was like, I'm sorry, I'm rusty, I've been in jail, all the things because he hadn't ever done that before. So I thought that was the end of the story, that we'd go our separate ways. But a couple of months later, he finds me on Facebook because we hadn't talked in a while. And he had found something I had written around relationships. And I had said something along the lines of, if someone does something harmful to you, many times it's a reflection of their own inner trauma. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. So he shares that with me and he says, I think that's what happened between us the night we met. And I'm like, excuse me? And he's like, you were projecting your own stuff onto me. And I think you felt uncomfortable. He made up this whole story. And I said, sir, no, I just didn't want to engage any further. And I went home. But I appreciate you. Have a good life. So then I ended up blocking him, not only on Facebook, but he tried to find me on WhatsApp and all these other places. And I had to block him. So moral of the story is, if it's too good to be true on that profile, it probably is. And do a little bit of vetting before you go onto a date off of an app, because you never know what you're going to get.
Oh my God, that story. Wow. The marble and the Vaseline and the condoms.
Girl, I was like, why? They don't go together. That's not, no, they break. I'm like, this is not it. They break.
Oh.
It was crazy. You know what's really sad about it too? Because I could tell. I even told him, like, it would be great if he had spent some time just reacclimating to society and then go do the dating, right? And even if he on his profile had been like, I'm an author, I wrote a book about my redemption story of coming out of jail, just be upfront. I was like, women love people who are from jail. Ted Bundy had a wife, okay? Like, listen, people love that. There are some people who will not judge it.
Work your angles. Come on,
work your angles. Be honest about you. Just be honest about your life. It just felt like a big bait and switch, like based on how he presented themselves and then what he was saying. And there's nothing wrong with coming out, and I think anyone can have the potential to change, but it felt very much like, I'm going to hide something from you and try to like scoop you in.
Well, that story was amazing. I never heard it. So thank you so much, Christina. I appreciate you coming up here and telling it. Everyone was riveted.
Well, thank you for letting me tell it. It's just one of my bad dating stories that I feel like it goes down in the books.
We hope you have many good date stories in your future.
Thank you.
Much better than that. Oh my God. All right. Well, and next up, we have, oh my gosh, I'm just looking at these titles. I'm not sure if I guess there's a theme here. We've got Beth Arkey coming up, and the title says, "So, prison, huh?" So let's bring it on. Here's our next prison love story from Beth Arkey. Okay.
You can hear me okay?
Oh, let's see. Do you have headphones? Jackie, help.
Hey, Beth, do you have two browsers open by any chance? Do you have a second, like a phone or anything with the app open?
Sometimes this happens. Actually, usually once in a show it happens.
Is that better? No.
Maybe let's move.
Bye.
Let's move forward. We'll come back to Beth in a minute.
Okay, that sounds good. All right, we'll be waiting on that prison story. Okay, so then next up is Michelle Arnold, and the little bit I have. Guy thought they stood each other up because doorbell broken. So let's bring up Michelle. I can't wait. Doorbell broken. Michelle Arnold, one of our longtime TueNighters. And
hello.
Hey
everyone. So
You're usually in the chat.
My story doesn't involve prison, unfortunately, so it's probably not going to be as riveting, but I'll try to make it fun. So my story starts out, it's in college, and the joke with my roommates and I was Michelle's friends with all the hot guys. So there was the guy who looked like Michael Hutchins. There was the guy who looked like Agent Dale Cooper. There was the guy who looked like Andre Agassi without the mullet. And there was the guy who looked exactly, uncannily like Charlie Sheen. Now, keep in mind, this was the early 90s before we realized he was actually gross. So, but the problem was the operative word there was always friends. So these hot guys were either not interested in me, not interested in women, or not interested in fun women. So I'm going, I'm just doing my thing in college, and I was a poli-sci minor with a focus in international relations because I kind of thought I wanted to work at the UN or some shit. So I was in an international conflicts class, and the guy who sat next to me, we just became friends in the context of the class. He was really cute, and he actually looked like Jason Bateman, but with like wavier hair on top. So he was also really, funny, charming. He liked good music, and he sometimes did open mic night stand-up comedy at local comedy clubs. So that was fun. And, he had a sort of Hugh Grant personality to him. So one day he invited me to go out to, anybody remember the postmodern PST dance parties in Philly? Yeah.
Yes.
So he invited me out to one of those on a Saturday, the coming up Saturday. And, so I was like, oh my God. He's like so cute, right? So all week, for the remainder of the week, my roommates are like teasing me about this. Like, Michelle's got a date. She's going out with this cute boy, like whatever. So Saturday night comes, and, I get dressed and I get prepared. And my roommates are like really excited to meet this guy. And we're waiting and waiting and waiting. And he doesn't come. Okay, well, maybe he's late. He doesn't come. Like he doesn't show up. So it turns from they're really excited to meet this guy and joking with me to that guy's an asshole. Oh my God, what an asshole. I can't believe what a jerk he is. So so we don't go out. So then the next week when I go to class, it's kind of awkward, you know, it's like he's just not talking to me. And then finally he's like, where were you on Saturday night? And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I waited for you all night and you never showed up. And he was like, I was there with my friends. Do you know how bad you made me look? And I'm like, what are you talking about? So later that week, we realized when Amy went out for groceries and no one came to let her in and help her bring the groceries in, that suddenly our buzzer wasn't working.
No. Oh my gosh.
Que sera, sera.
Oh man. That is, womp womp.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you're right, Deborah, not meant to be. So it's fine.
Yes. Not the man, not the person you ended up with.
And to be perfectly honest, I don't even remember his name.
Oh, okay. Well, didn't even make it in Brentwood or a bud.
So.
Well, thank you. That was funny. Thank you for sharing. And we'll see you back in the chat. You're one of my favorite chatters. Thanks, Michelle. All right. So, Jackie, should we try to bring Beth back up? What do you think?
Yeah, that's coming up.
All right. So, Prison Part 2, Electric Boogaloo. Oh, Beth?
Yes.
Yay!
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Let's hear your tale.
Okay. You're gonna think I made this up. I started online dating at 55 after I was married for 22 years, and I had, you know, a learning curve, and I, you know, did what people told me to and vetted people and chatted with people for a while. And I was on Tinder and I decided I was going to try something different and not spend a lot of time chatting and not find out much about someone and just meet them. So I matched with this guy and we agreed to meet for tea at a diner on Smith Street in Brooklyn. So I get there and he's sitting in a booth. So I go over and he seemed very nice and he ordered tea for us. And we start chatting and I'm asking questions and we're having just, you know, general get to know you conversation. And then he said, I have something to tell you. I said, okay. He said, a while back, I was at a party and I ran into my ex. And I said, okay. And he said, we started fighting. And I said, okay. And he said, she started hitting me with her purse. And somebody grabbed me from behind and I didn't know who it was. And I had the purse at that point and I hit the person and it turned out to be a cop.
Oh.
And I was sent to jail, prison. And I was served 2 years. And I said, oh, when did you get out? And he said, 2 weeks ago.
Oh my God.
I said, oh, okay. You know, how's it going? And he said, well, you know, I'm trying to get back, you know, in the world, and I guess so. He's on Tinder, and he didn't write much. That was the other thing that I did that was stupid, and just sort of liked his picture. And so then I said, oh, well, how's it going? And he tells me he's working. I can't even remember now. It was a few years ago what kind of a job he had. But then he says, yeah, and I shower at my mom's. And I said, oh, well, why do you do that? And he said,
I'm sorry. I need to laugh. You just know it's going to be bad.
Sorry. It's not nice to laugh. I'm living in a homeless shelter.
Oh my God.
I've just got to, you know, he's just gotten out of jail. He's living in a homeless shelter and showering at his mom's. He did pay for my tea. So I'm starting to think, okay, how do I get out of here? But I'm this nice girl from the Midwest. And so then he kind of reaches his hands over, like across the table, as if he wants me to hold his hands. And then he says, can I touch your boobs?
Oh no.
I don't quite remember how I got out of there. I don't think I ran, but I got up and I got out of there. So, and I've had some really bad dates. I mean, this is one of many, but it does have, you know, great shock value. And I just kind of learned I need to, you know, stick with the ones who write something about themselves and chat with them for a while. And I don't do it every time, but if I have any kind of vibe, I have started doing background checks.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a doozy.
Very juicy. Oh my goodness. And how do I come back? There we go. Oh my God. The anticipation. I knew it was going to be just like something. Wow.
Well, Christina, you and I should, you know, take this off, you know, just the two of us.
Maybe so. I don't know. I think we get Christina in there. I think this is a whole tour.
Now I'm starting to double date.
Oh, no. Yes. Somebody actually suggested, they're like, oh my God, you should do this weekly. I was like, it's very cathartic. Okay. Well. Oh, boobs and Vaseline. Boob is my favorite spelling of boob. Boob.
It's amazing that I'm still doing this. It really is. I really want to meet someone.
Yes.
Obviously.
And I'm sending you good vibes. We all deserve to meet our person. But that was pretty funny. But the bad days do make for good stories. So we love it.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you, Beth.
Sure.
Thank you very much for telling your story. And next up, we have Jenny Douglas. And the little note I have is kissing before talking. So please welcome Jenny Douglas and maybe Marianne Fontana together. I'm not sure. Are they together?
Oh. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, you sound good.
Perfect. So I'm here up in Margaretville, New York with my dear friend Marianne Fontana, who's here for an overnight. And we were invited by Margit. Yeah, we're not drinking tea.
Better, stronger.
Anyway, I just want to say, like, it's so sweet and fun to be together, to hear everyone's stories, to kind of revel in our shared humanity, in our kind of like sitting with the questions of what it is to be middle-aged, although was it Christina who told that great story? I think at 33. That was a great story, Christina, but I think you're a little younger than we expected.
Yeah.
But
And
good for
Margit
you.
didn't give us the memo that they had to be prison stories.
Yeah, come on, bring it.
Anyway, there are so many. I'm 57. I was divorced when I think I was 44. It's been a while now. And I had a good 7-year stretch of OkCupidifying, wallpapering my life with OkCupid. That's not true, but like lots of OkCupid dates. And until an hour ago, I was going to tell the story of my last first date before meeting the man who I've been with for 7 years, very happily, who I met at age 50, and who I recently dropped down on one knee in front of at the Grand Army Plaza, arch in Park Slope, and asked to marry me. And he said yes. And so I'm engaged. And I thought I would never, ever want to get married again. And lo and behold, I'm engaged, and I'm very happy about it, much to my shock. But anyway, I was telling Marion the story that I wanted to tell, and she said, well, what about this other story? So I just thought, what the heck? I'm going to tell this story. It's brief, but I kind of, to Jody's point, I do want to kind of affirm her idea that, like, it's so important. I don't know if you didn't say this, Jody, but I'm riffing on your idea. Like, to have fun while you're doing it is so important. And to kind of, like, I found what really worked for me is that, like, I had to enjoy myself, and enjoying myself wasn't predicated on anything that any of the men that I was meeting had to do. Like, enjoying myself could be them behaving ridiculously and me having great stories to tell people like Marion after the dates, or just kind of like reveling in, like, sort of the breadth of our shared humanity and just the eclecticism of people in general. So here's the story. So one thing I want to say, like, when I was, as I said, my kids were, I guess, in their teens when I got divorced. And one interesting kind of benefit from dating in middle age is with kids is that I realized, like, I had so much more freedom than I did in my 20s, say, when on some level I was looking for a partner who could also be a potential father to my unborn children. So the sky was the limit. I was with, my kids were with me half the week. They were with their dad in Park Slope across from Flatbush Avenue. I'm in Park Slope for the other half of the week. So I had a lot of freedom to kind of entertain the possibility of going on dates with all manner of men. And I did that. I went on dates with all manner of men. So I won't, I'm thinking right now of the bisexual jazz saxophonist who on our first date decided my name was not Jenny, it was Ondine Water Spirit. He felt like that would be a better name for me. It should have been just one date, but the Puritan in me, like, stretched it into a whole fucking 2-year relationship.
So he called you Undine?
Anyway, so he called me.
Tell me that.
So he called me Undine for 2 years, and then there was, like, the one date I had with this adjunct professor at SUNY downstate who talked for 2 hours straight, and at the end of our one date said, "You are the most amazing conversationalist." And then there was the guy I dated who, like, after our first night together, I stupidly said, and the lawyer in me, and I'm not a lawyer at all, but, like, I guess it's lawyers who say never ask a question that you don't in some way know the answer to. So I said to him, "What's the worst thing you've ever done?" Never ask that question.
Is this a jail story?
No, it's not a jail story, but it should be. He said, "I shouldn't even say it here." Okay, he said, "No, I'm not going to say it. I'm actually not."
Oh,
I said,
come on.
"It's a really bad thing." So let me just move on to my current story. The story is, so in obviously, as you can tell from the few little examples I gave, I just decided to have fun with dating and to not have a strict laundry list of who would be acceptable for a date and who wouldn't. I kind of just opened up the curtains and went out with lots of different kinds of men. So one day, some guy, this is maybe a few years into my midlife dating. I was probably 48, something like that, maybe 10 years ago. I got a message from some guy, and we were having a great little sort of text flirtation. And it turned out that he was a jazz saxophonist near me in Brooklyn. He taught, I actually knew who he was because he taught at a private school in Brooklyn. He had this, again, I have to be careful because I don't want to like say anything, but anyway, he was a well-known in his field, like he was this kind of impresario of jazz. And so I knew who he was. He didn't know who I was. And we had this kind of really this frisson back and forth, texting, and we decided to meet in Prospect Park. And as part of our little back and forth, we thought, well, what would it be like if we met in Prospect Park one morning this week and we kissed before speaking? And I just realized like that just seemed kind of like a fun dare. So it was, I think that this is another thing about online dating in middle age when you've lived a while and you feel like you can kind of take risks. I was doing it not for anything to do with him because I liked the idea of daring myself to meet a stranger in the park at 10:20 on a Tuesday morning and kiss him before speaking because I'd never done that before. And I thought, why not? So anyway, the appointed day came a few days after this proposal. I don't know if I came up with the idea or he did, so I can't like blame it on him. It may well have been me. And I'm walking down Prospect Park West and I'm feeling like filled with daring do. And I'm also like giggling hysterically by myself because I can't believe I'm doing this. I can't believe I'm about to kiss a man I've never spoken with before speaking with him. So I'm laughing so hard walking down Prospect Park West that I'm practically peeing my pants. I'm sure I look like a crazy woman. And I went in through the thing at 9th Street in Prospect Park West. We agreed to meet at some designated place, like a 10-foot pace away from a given picnic table. And I remember just kind of having this little moment when I saw him thinking, oh my God, like, what am I doing? But then it's sort of like, you decide you've committed to something and you won't like kind of absorb other information that's coming at to you in real time. I was like, I just told myself I was going to kiss this guy. So I go, I'm kind of shuffling, looking at my feet. I put my arms around him and we start kissing. And for the first 3 minutes, I'm like, wow, this is so amazing. I'm just like, I can't believe myself. And then like on second 4, I'm like, I open my eyes and I'm like, what the fuck? It's 10:20 on a Tuesday morning. I barely know this guy's name and I'm kissing him. I've never said a word to him. So like the spell is broken. I stand back and he looks at me and he says, so what do you want to do next? And I'm just like, oh my God. So I looked at him with as much compassion as I could muster. And I just said, I want to go home now. And I gave him a kiss on the cheek, a little peck, and I turned on my merry little way. And I went right back Prospect Park West into my house, got a cup of coffee, and went about my day. And that's the end of my story.
Very good. Very good. All right, that was wonderful. Oh, God. Oh, we're all talking about him as if he's Kenny G in the chat. So it's a whole other aspect to the story. Marion, so you have a story as well?
I do. I dated a long time. And I kind of lived my life backwards because I met my husband at 18 and then he died on 9/11. He was a firefighter. And so I didn't start dating until I was 35. And I had no idea what I was doing. And I was the opposite of Jenny. I was terrified. There were no apps, by the way, 19 years ago. There was a website called Nerve that was kind of like the Village Voice of the internet, where you didn't have pictures. You just wrote people. And I found this guy who seemed interested. And one of the questions they ask is, if you could be anywhere right now, where would you be? And my answer was Katz's Deli, eating a corned beef and rye. And so he liked that. And he said, why don't we meet there? And I said, sounds good. So we picked a date and we timed, and I was terrified. And it was a hot summer night. I'm standing in front of Katz's Deli waiting for him. And he texted me and he said, my subway's messed up. I'm taking the crosstown bus. And I was like, okay. He was late. So I'm standing there. I see the crosstown bus go by. and the bus goes, shh, and I went, oh no. And he gets off and he has 2 canes and he starts hobbling towards me. And my mind's racing. I'm like, okay, don't be an asshole and try to be kind. And we don't know what this is and blah, blah, blah. And he gives me a hug and I introduce myself. He's sweating. He has 2 canes. We go into Katz's Deli and I like forget that it's self-serve. So he's got to carry a tray. And I'm like, do I carry the tray for him? Do I get him a number? Do I get his stuff? But he was very confident. He's like, okay, well, I'm going to go get a hot dog. I'll meet you at that table. And so I'm like trying to talk in my head. I'm like, what do I do? I don't know how to do this. And so we sit down and I said, well, it's really nice to meet you. And we had a nice conversation. But I got to say, I'm a little freaked out that you didn't tell me that you had issues. And he said, oh, well, you didn't tell me you were a 9/11 widow. And I was like, how did you know that? And this is, now you have to remember, this is 19 years ago. He said, I Googled you. And that's how old I am. I was like, what's Google? It's because I really didn't know about it. So he said, well, you have your issues. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? You're right. So we start talking. It turns out we went to the same high school. We both went to performing arts. I didn't recognize him because he's bald now, but he took out a picture. I'm like, oh my God, I remember you were a senior and we were having this great talk. And he's like, so why didn't you tell me about 9/11? I said, I need one night. Let's just like not about that day and 9/11 and firefighters. I just don't want to talk about it. And literally like a movie cue, this woman says, someone call 911. And this guy 2 tables down collapses on the ground and people are standing up and calling 911. And, I'm a firefighter wife. So I know that engine 33 is around the corner and I have the direct number. I know all the guys. So I call the direct number. They come over, they start clanking in, and give the guy oxygen. He's all gray and they, start administering. He's okay. They bring him to the hospital and then they see me and they're like, hey, Marion, how are you? What are you doing? What are you doing? And they're all coming over and clanking over. And I'm like, oh, hi, this is John. So I'm introducing everyone. And he's like, what are you doing here? And I'm like, oh, I'm on a date. And they're like, oh, all right, well, we'll leave you alone. And they leave. And I was like, I'm sorry. I was like, that was really weird. And he's like, no, that is the best date I could possibly have imagined for the night. And that was my date. I didn't see him again, but until our reunion, it turns out he had a car crash and he had his hips broken and he had to wait till the technology, he was too young to get hip replacements. So we had to wait for the technology. Now he's fine. He was walking around. He was at my reunion and he's great. And he has a girlfriend and all is good.
Wow.
So that was my first date. Yeah.
That was touching. Like that was also just yeah. What a story.
Yeah.
Thank you both for sharing. Those were just wonderful, and your insights too. Yeah, Jenny, you always have those good insights about dating and life. Ondine rather, which I said I was singing to the tune of Jolene. Ondine. Okay, no, we won't do that. All right. Well, we have one more story. We didn't schedule this one, but Deborah has asked to share her story, and I can't say no. So if y'all have we're all already at 9:08, but if you have some time, let's only one. Yes, let's bring up Deborah from the audience. We want to hear your story about your 20-minute date. I think she's coming. Okay. She's on her way. Ondine. What happened? Oh. Well, you're coming up, Deborah, aren't you, to tell your story? Maybe. I don't really have any other bad date story. Well, I do. I have the librarian who called me his Valkyrie. He really liked my German last name and decided I was some sort of opera singer and he wanted to call me his Valkyrie. And I was like, I'm out of here. That's weird. It's super weird. Michelle says publishing took too long. Tech person to help. Oh dear. Well, in the meantime, Jackie, are you there?
Yep, just trying to get Deborah on screen. It might
Just
be.
give it up for Jackie. Jackie is behind the scenes at all of these events. And she's amazing. She's been with us when we do our storytelling events. Incredible. We love Jackie. Jackie
Thanks,
Banda.
guys. Hey, Deborah, oh, great, you accepted. So it should pop you up on screen shortly.
Okay. Well, I should be vamping. It's just like 9:08. I'm tired. Oh, this is a show, right? Okay, vamp.
It might be a slow connection. We might have to. It's probably a tech thing. So.
Okay. Well,
fortunately,
no. Deborah, can you tell us in the chat, and maybe we'll bring Jody back? Yes, and I'm telling you, we're going to have more of these. You know, we're going to do more storytelling events. We're going to bring those back, and Deborah, maybe we can have you share in that, or maybe we'll do another bad date, good date story swap.
Hi again.
Yeah.
Those were the best stories. Oh my goodness. Each one of you ladies had an incredible tale to tell, and bravo for getting through it. And Jenny, you are so spot on. You got what I was saying. It's like, make the most of all of this, right? Make it fun. You know, we only go around once, and just enjoy and find something in every date. That's my recommendation. Learn something, entertain yourself. It's best attitude.
I love that. I love that. Well, so Jody, you have an event coming up, right? Your book launch,
Yeah,
I think is.
I do. It is next Tuesday. It's a week from tonight as a TueNighter doing something on, TueNight.
Oh, very cool.
Next Tuesday is the virtual launch of the book. I'm doing it in conjunction with Literati Bookstore in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I'm coming to you from San Francisco, actually, but I'm doing it with them. And I have the distinct honor of having Robin as part of Gelfenbein, as part of the event. She is going to be in conversation with me about storytelling, and we're going to tell stories. So yes.
Robin, are you here? I know she was going to try to make it. I don't know if she's in the audience. Robin has so many amazing stories.
She absolutely does. Yes. And so it's going to be next Tuesday night, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. And to get information about that, if you just pop over to firstdatestories.com, and that can be FIRST or 1st.com/book. There's all the information about that event and other book tour events going on. I'm going to be in LA. If you're in LA, I'm going to be there next week as well, in Culver City on Thursday. So would love to see you there too. Yeah.
That's awesome. And I know Jackie put the information in the chat, so you can get info there.
Thank you, Jackie. Yep. Yes. It's great. This is it's a dream come true. It really is to be able to be with this group and to hear these stories and to share other women's stories with all of you through this book.
We're so glad and thankful to have you. And thanks to all the people who shared their stories. They were wonderful. It's like why we do what we do, right? It's just, it's good stuff. I want to also mention tomorrow. So this month we're talking all about kind of dating and relationships, and we're in the middle of a dating workshop with Erica Eden, who I noticed. I didn't even know that she blurbed your book.
She blurbed my book. Yes, Erica is fabulous, cool. And she is a contributor to the blog we have at First Date Stories. She's one of our featured contributors. So she's such a rock star. I love that you have her involved in the classes at TueNight.
Yeah, and last week was fantastic. We talked about profile photos, and I'm not dating, but I was totally into it for a host of reasons because LinkedIn photo, whatever. It's really great, and I know she's got really tactical, practical ideas about dating. So I think if you haven't joined the first two, they're available on TueNighters.com. If you're not a member, please join. That's one of the benefits. You can watch some of these videos after the fact. But feel free to join in the middle because I think it's all good information. So we have 2 more weeks of that workshop coming up. And then next month, a very special workshop in October. We're going to do the 4 Ds of end of life with an end of life doula. And that's going to be incredible. I'm really looking forward to that one. Just like lots of practical information about, whether it's for yourself or your parents, and just how to prepare. Those aren't easy conversations to have. So, a lot of people have told me that that's top of mind for them. So we wanted to do that. And then at the end of the year, we're going to do something around sort of a little bit mental health and seasonal affective disorder with Dr. Alfie, and just sort of like take stock of the year and how we're feeling and doing, and probably another one of these kind of maybe casual storytelling shares as well. So sign up for that one. And and I hope to see you in TueNighters and online and all the spaces that we live in these days. Hopefully in person soon, actually. So maybe something coming up with that. We'll see. So thank you all for coming. Thank you, Jody. And
thank you, Margit.
Have a good night.
Thank you.